Check one, check one. I'm going to wait for the last few people to come in before we get started this morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this early Easter Sunday. Is it just me, or does it feel weird having Easter in March? Yeah, feels a little off. So I was like, I thought it was supposed to be in April, but this one's in March. So I know there's reasons why it's in March and not in April, but it still feels a little weird to me. Well, today we're going to continue our lessons in Proverbs, so from King Solomon. And the last few weeks we had talked about, I was gone last week in Palm Beach, Florida, and had a great, successful, rewarding trip. So I was very thankful, and God blessed me during that trip. So, like I said, I feel very fortunate and very blessed to have a good, successful trip and to come home with a little money and not losing money. So it's always a blessing. Well, over the last few weeks, we had talked about several things. We talked about being a fool, which I was an expert at times in my life. We've talked about prerequisites of wisdom. What it takes in order to find wisdom, how to line yourself up with it. Last time we spoke, we talked about, do words matter? Or do our words that we choose matter? And so today, what we're going to speak about is, I want to talk about poverty. Poverty is mentioned about 11 times in Proverbs, but I couldn't really talk about poverty without talking about work. So I think that they go hand in hand. If you're not a good worker, you're probably going to end up in poverty. Would y'all agree with that? And so we're going to kind of go back and forth between workmanship and poverty, and what leads to both. So I want to ask, where did poverty begin? Does anybody have an idea of where poverty began? Like, where do we first read about poverty? Where do we first read about, where did it begin, Does anybody have any ideas of where we can first read about poverty in the Bible? Or, right. That's one example of it. I go to Genesis 2, from the Garden of Eden. So I think it all begins right in the Garden of Eden. And, if we read we're going to start in Genesis on this lesson. But in the beginning, he says, so right after here, I'm going to start in chapter 2 and verse 15. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat it, you will surely die. So right here, I think we have the beginning of abundance, wouldn't you say? He said, what's more abundant than every and freely? Every tree you can freely eat. So he told Adam, Eve wasn't around yet here. Eve comes along in 21. So he told Adam, every single tree in the garden is good for food, right? Except for one that was in the midst of the garden. And so, that is the abundance mindset that God gave us. He gave us everything. And, there wasn't only trees in the garden. We can read earlier that in verse 11, 12, he says, let me see. The name of the first is Fishon. He's talking about the rivers. It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. So the garden had gold in it. Now, were there stores in the Garden of Eden, like grocery stores or marketplaces or any of that? Well, why did we have gold if you didn't have to buy any food with it? But the gold was there and it was good. So, and that tells me that that has an abundance mindset to it. So he was giving them extra on top of everything that they already had and they already needed. All they were supposed to do was to till and take care of the garden, right? Well, if we look at the Garden of Eden, what it stands for, we know that, where's my notes? So a garden is a protected place, right? So it's a protected place, and it's a protected place of pleasure is Eden. So it's a protected place of pleasure, is what he gave Adam and Eve to live in. So, which is pretty good. I'd love to have a protected place of pleasure, which we do in marriage. Is another way to kind of look at that. Marriage is a protected place of pleasure for us, for a man and a wife. In here, we can read that, we read about the abundance, and if we go further down, we know that God put a deep sleep over Adam, and then, pulled out a rib, made woman, and which more than that, but that's the base of it. And, because he needed someone that was suitable for him, correct? And so we go a little bit further down. It says that they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. It said, now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he had said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? So the serpent, which is, we know that he walked, right? We know that he had legs and feet in the beginning because God, whenever he punished him, he took away his ability to speak. But we know that the serpent could speak to people, in the beginning. So we know that he could speak, and he went to the woman. So Eve, he went to Eve first, and he had deceived Eve, right? But what he did was he got her to focus on the lack that was in the abundance of the garden. So I think when we focus on, they actually had to go out of their way to bypass all the trees, the apple trees, the peach trees, the pear trees, lime trees, lemon trees, like every fruit-bearing tree, they had to go walk past it to go to the midst of the garden to find the one they weren't supposed to have. So Satan brought, I believe, the beginning of poverty mindset, which is a mindset of lack. It's saying that I don't have enough. I can never have enough. I'm always going to be without abundance. Would you all agree with that? Is that what poverty is? Poverty is not having abundance in your life. Is kind of that's the definition that I'm going to give it. It really makes sense to me. So I think in the beginning of time, that was where we first read about poverty, because he gets them to not focus on all the abundance that they have and focus on the one thing that they don't have. And I think that's the beginning of poverty too, because once we start focusing on what we don't have, we can't see any of the abundance around us. But they had to be blind, because the amount of abundance that was in the Garden of Eden was as abundant as you can get. There's nothing more abundant than eat freely of every tree. That's as abundant as you can get. To me, that's as good as it gets. I could just imagine having my garden like that. My garden is struggling at the moment, but we're working on it. We're trying to till the soil a little bit, and I got to cultivate, and it definitely takes some time to harvest some fruit. It's not an overnight process, as we know. But in this kind of poverty mindset, he switches a lot of the words, so that's what the devil's really good at. Satan can switch words on us and switch meanings, and the woman said to the serpent in verse 2, chapter 3, "We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die." Did he say not to touch it? No, she added that in there, right? Now, I also see some communication problems here between Adam and Eve, because he told Adam first, right? Eve wasn't around whenever he told him not to eat of the tree of good and evil. And then we read right after that Satan comes in and goes straight to Eve and tries to manipulate her, and doesn't try, he successfully manipulates her. But he starts questioning her. Well, she starts adding on to what God's, promises were, what his commandment was, right? So she eats of the fruit. He says, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave it to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and both of them knew that they were naked. And then they sewed the fig leaves together and made themselves coverings, right? So to me, and then right after this, in verse 14, so Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field, and on your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. Well, to me, that's the beginning of it, right there. So we can go back, and right here in the beginning of the creation, we have God's creation. It took him 6 days, and he rested, right, on the seventh, and it was perfect. Everything in it was perfect, but it just took us just a little bit of time to mess it up, and to focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have. And I think that poverty is a mindset that we need to be careful what we think about, right? So we're going back to what we think about. If we're always thinking about what we don't have in life, or how our spouses could be better, or what we wish we can change in them, or our kids should be smarter and wiser, like all the things that they don't have, then we are setting ourselves up for poverty in life. And that's not just poverty with money, that's poverty in everything that is a lack-based. It's not enough. When God gave us everything we could ever wish for, we have it, we have access to it. And our words do matter, as we talked about a few weeks ago, but your words are the words you choose are the window in which you see through. So if you choose to use words that are lacking, you're going to have a hard time seeing abundance in life. Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, So this brings me into there's a word that some of the translations use calls a sluggard. Do y'all know what a sluggard is? What's a sluggard? A lazy person, a lazy man. Are lazy people wealthy? And why not? They don't do anything, right? Their hands don't make anything. They don't create anything. Well, I think starting off and looking at the sluggard is a good way to kind of figure out where our poverty comes from. And there's several verses that talk about the sluggard or the lazy man. So if we let's get back to Proverbs now. I feel like, do y'all believe that poverty began in the Garden of Eden? Would y'all agree with me on that one? I would say so. So since that's the beginning of everything, it's pretty much a start, and it runs hand in hand with sin, right? And fear and all the bad negative thoughts that we put ourselves through. So if we go to Proverbs, let's start with 19 verse 24. That's what Solomon has to say about it. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Can y'all imagine that? Being so lazy that you got food in front of you, it's prepared, but you can't even grab it and put it in your mouth. That's how I read that. It's right. If you're taking up all the time, you're taking up all the space, can you share? Well, and it's one of the things that's a good point. It's one of the things that we learn is that a righteous man has plenty for everyone, right? And a lazy man is stingy. It's like we read about the parable of the talents, right? That's a good example. With one was given one was given 5, one was given 10, 10 doubled, 5 doubled, 1 hid it away, right? He didn't do anything with it. So he was in lack. He was selfish. He said, "Oh, I gotta keep this back. I don't want anybody having it." Well, God tells us several times, or Solomon tells us through Proverbs that we have to be giving in order to have abundance. If you are a lack mindset, you'll never be able to see abundance. If you're trying to keep everything for yourself, there's plenty for everybody. And a good man toils his soil to where he has plenty to give to the rest of them. Like you said, they left the outskirts for all the needy, right? Where they could come in and get what they needed to survive. Well, a lazy man keeps it all for himself and keeps more than what is necessary. But a lot of times it goes to waste. We can read also in, let's go to chapter 20, verse 4. A lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing. So the lazy man, he won't plow during winter. So he said, "Oh, it's too cold outside. I can't go out there and work. It's too cold. I can't do the tough stuff I need to do during the tough times in order to get the fruit or get the harvest, the crops that I want later." So if you're lazy, you just don't want to do anything, but you always are quick to find excuses, right? I've got a good friend of mine that I love dearly, but man, he sure can come up with an excuse. "Oh, I've never done that before. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I don't." And I was like, "Well, have you tried? Have you even tried doing it?" "Well, no, I'm scared. I'm scared to try something new." I think that's your easiest way to get into poverty, is to come up with excuses. So we do know that a sluggard is someone that, like if we read in 20 verse 4, he said, "will not plow because of winter." So we know that he's slow to start. Would you agree with that? They have a hard time getting started. They just sit there and kind of contemplate and wait and think about it and talk about it, and but they don't ever really do anything about it. They just talk about it, and well, the act of doing is the most important part of not being lazy. If you're lazy, you don't want to do anything. And I tell you, a few years ago, I retired. I was so busy, I was so stressed in my business and my work, and I had more work than I could handle. And so I was so stressed that I retired at the ripe old age of 43. I was like, I'm retired. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do nothing. I want to just live off my gains, and I want to spend all my time with my family, which I was able to do during that period of time. We went traveling. We traveled the country in a motorhome and homeschooled our kids, and I gave them all of my time. Well, it was last year, my middle daughter, Margot, said to me, she said, "Dad, you're lazy." And I was taken aback. I was like, "Girl, if you only knew all those times when you were asleep and Dad went to work, and Dad worked till 2 o'clock in the morning, but I was up at 7, back home up at 7, take you to school and all that kind of stuff." So they didn't see any of that because a lot of my work happened after hours. But for those 2 years, I was lazy. And my wealth went away from me because I wasn't working my craft. Now I'm back to working daily. I'm back to doing, and I want as much abundance as God will give me. It wasn't I had to change my ways, but it was my 8-year-old daughter that said, "Dad, you're lazy." And I was like, "What? Me? Like Mr. 60 hours a week, lazy?" But she didn't see that. She didn't see that because I was always there, but they had always seen me at home watching TV, watching a Netflix or whatever, because I was like, well, I got money coming in, I got, some saved up, I got all these kind of things that I thought were going to protect me. And I thought this money was just going to keep flowing in, Well, it didn't, of course. But for that period of time, I was a lazy man, and my 8-year-old called me out on it. And I'm very thankful she did, because at that time I did look lazy. But, little did she know that the previous 15 years I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, and I'm addicted to work. I love work. I mean, I can go work all day. It won't, give me 70 hours a week worth of work and I will take it. So I'm a workaholic. Now I think a lot of that came from my father, that, if you didn't work 60 hours a week, you were lazy. 40 hours a week isn't enough. People that work 40 hours a week are lazy. And that was I don't know if he said that, but that was how, I took it. That's exactly how I took it. So, well, that's not enough. And in today's world, if you're working only 40 hours a week, can you make ends meet? It's hard. It's really hard to make ends meet if you're only getting 40 hours a week. And now a lot of the working class is getting shut down to less hours a week. I hear they're trying to pass where we're going to have a 4-day work week. We're only going to work 32 hours. It would be great if we could get all the work done in 32 hours, but I don't think we can get all the work done in 32 hours. And I feel like working, to me, fulfills my soul. Like when I work and I put a good hard day's labor into my work, I feel it. My soul feels it. I'm glorified. I can go to Colossians 3, and when he says, in your work, do it heartily, or do it with all your heart, but work as if you're working for the Lord, not for man. So we can get our soulful rewards by our workmanship that we put out into the world. So the things that we do, if we do it with love and abundance, then guess what? If we work with God's ways and his spirit within us, and we're doing it to please the Lord and not our boss, guess what he's going to give us? He's going to give us riches. We're definitely not going to have poverty. And I guarantee you, if you work for somebody and you are working in the Lord and you are trying to satisfy the Lord with your workmanship, I guarantee you ain't going to get fired. There ain't no way a boss is going to get rid of that person in today's world. A guy that always shows up on time, does what he says he's going to do, stays until after the work is done, make sure the work is done. We know one thing about a sluggard. Sluggards tend to, what's this? Oh, that's a squirrel over there. Let me go look at this squirrel for a little bit. Oh, what's that little bird over here? They kind of bounce around, right? Lazy people, they bounce around from the next thing, the next newest thing. They're constantly moving and shifting. But what does that say about them? They don't finish their jobs. I don't know how many men in here have projects at home, honey-do list to fix things. Do you got them all done? You got everything? Oh, come on. Why not? Too many? But again, it's very easy for us to start a job and not finish it, especially in the house if you're a remodeler, especially in your own home. Now, on the job site, you got to finish the job. You'll never get paid. Like as a contractor, we have a contracting business, so we're always fixing stuff for people. Well, I don't get paid the rest of my money until I finish the job. I start with a little bit down, and then I don't ask for any money until I'm done, until I know that they are satisfied with my work, and they know that I've done it in a way that is pleasing to them. So I don't even ask for the money until it's done. Same way in my art business, if I get a commission, get a little bit of money down, let me finish it. And if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. But I know that's how God would want me to do it. I don't want someone to pay for something they're not happy with. So, back to the sluggard, which, this lesson here really hit home with me because of Margot's words that still stick with me today, calling me lazy. But for that period of time, I was lazy. And I go through and I read, what he says here. He says that so we know sluggards are slow to start. We know they're easily distracted, which my ADD will kick in, and I'm not medicated for it or any of that, and I probably should be. I don't know. I don't like medicine, so I'm one of those, I just need to focus. Because if I can focus, I won't be easily distracted. Would y'all agree with that? So focus, intention and focus are the most important things that we can do in order to keep on the path, right? And get our jobs done and not be lazy. So we also read that, so we know that they don't finish their jobs either, right? So in order to not be a sluggard or a lazy person, what do we got to do? We got to start easy, right? We got to stay focused with intention, and then we got to finish our job. So if we can do that in life, in all of our ways and the things, especially in our workmanship, we will be at the top of the list when it comes to workers. Because we do what we're saying we're going to do. We start easily, quickly, and then we get the job done. And we stay on the job until the job gets done, which I think is the most important thing you can do. Like, you can't stop too early. A lot of times we have so much failure that we decide to pull back. Oh, I'm done with this. Well, your success was the next step, but you quit too early. You didn't see it through. You didn't finish the job. We were painting fence this weekend, so I got several 100 yards of fence to paint, and I got paint all over my knuckles and everything. And you know, the girls like, "Are we done yet?" I have my daughters out there, and I tell you, I got a huge joy. They had a chance to go to my parents' church in Sigaville to go Easter egg hunting, and my kids said, "No, I want to stay here and paint fence with Dad." Go ahead. Well, I don't know where they got that, because I would have been Easter egg hunting when I was a kid, for sure. And I would have went to everyone available in the neighborhood, like wherever, bring it, give me more candy. But they said, "Hey, I want to stay and paint fence with Dad." Well, at one point, I had all 3 daughters out there. We were painting fence. Well, Livy, of course, was the first one to lose interest, you know, and she's like, "Oh, look at these squirrels over here." She went over and was picking up sticks, and which for me, I was kind of happy whenever they quit working with me, because I could use 3 tools at the same time. I had 2 rollers in the bucket. I had a paintbrush. While one roller's, finished dripping, I'm rolling this one out. I got to, put that one in there, let it start going, take this other one, and I'm hitting this one, and I'm covering so much fence in such a short amount of time. And when my girls get in there, it's like, got patches here, did a little bit of here. "Oh, Dad, this is hurting my hand. I need this. Can I have that one?" "Oh, yeah, I guess." But I'm like, man, I sure am fast with these 2 rollers and this brush. Like myself by myself with all 3 tools, I get it done. I was lightning fast, like someone was cracking a whip on me or paying me, one of the 2, but I was getting it done. Well, I had to talk with my wife. I said, "You know what? I am getting every dose that my dad dealt with when I was working for him at a young age." So we were paint contractors, so I grew up painting, and I was always on the job site with my dad at a young age, middle age, the high school. But I had a moment yesterday where all 3 of my kids were sluggardish, in that moment, and I was like, man, that sure does remind me of me when I was hiding out over here, or I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, and I was supposed to be focused on the job, but I wasn't. I was here, there, wherever, And so that little moment I had was like, well, here you go, Tanner. There's that full circle life, that you're learning. But I was so thankful that they were out there working with me, and they wanted to work with me. So I felt like that was a huge blessing, and the work that they did give me, I was so thankful for it. I didn't even have to pay them. Can you believe that? They didn't even ask for money. So I don't know. They definitely didn't get that from me. Anytime I did the work, I'm like, okay, it's time to get paid. I got to pay for some stuff. So I see we're almost out of time today. Today's a short one. One of the last questions that I have is, what leads us to poverty in life? Does anybody have an idea what leads us to poverty? Laziness, number 1, right? I think also a lack of love, and also a lack of faith in God and what our job is for Him. Like, we are to glorify God through our workmanship. Would y'all agree with that? And so if we're not working in a way that glorifies God in our output, then guess what we're going to find very easily? Poverty. So, well, we'll pick up next week when we have a fuller class, or a fuller time of class. And but thank y'all for joining us today. And happy Easter to those that love Easter.